set.
Okay, ready? Okay. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank you for your patience as we continue to work through the investigation of these two cases. I want to take a moment to provide you with a brief update to our investigation of the two E. coli cases involving the children from Androscoggin County. Late this morning, Maine's Health and Environmental Testing Laboratory identified the strain of E. coli in these two cases. The strain, known as 0111, is one of many strains that can be responsible for an illness like HUS. The strain and molecular typing from each patient was identical, making it highly likely that the cases acquired the illness from the same source. We cannot say with certainty what that common exposure may have been. We are continuing our investigation, which becomes more extensive when a molecular match like this exists between two cases. Since we know that the Oxford County Fairground is a place where both children visited, environmental samples were collected and are being tested. Samples were taken from several places, including the main barn, the outside pens, and in the livestock area or petting zoo. These tests will not be completed until next week. It is important to note that the incubation period for E. coli is 1 to 10 days. So anyone who might become ill from exposure to E. coli at the Oxford Fair would already be ill. We have not had any further reports of serious illness related to E. coli in the last 2 weeks. It's important for individuals experiencing severe diarrheal illness, especially bloody diarrhea, to contact their healthcare provider whenever it occurs, as it could be an indicator of a more serious illness. People who have contact with or are exposed to animals should always wash their hands afterward with soap and water to lessen the chance of exposure to disease. If soap and water is not available, hand sanitizer may be used. I anticipate that we will be able to provide you with another update at the end of next week, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
We've all kind of been covering this story all week long, as you can imagine, speaking to different people.
Yes.
The father of the Colton wanted me to ask you, there's a lot been said about washing hands and sanitizers, and we've all been to the fairs and we see them everywhere in the signs. Is it true that the hand sanitizers are not as good as washing with hot soapy water?
I think we would say that the first line of defense would be washing with soap and water. Hand sanitizer could supplement that easily. If soap and water is not available, hand sanitizer would be the next best thing.
Because obviously not either or is not a sure thing, as the father has told us, or me at least, that the hand sanitizers at the fairground were empty, and they brought their own and did use it, and obviously he said, look where we are. So, and the veterinarian is telling me that that's good. They're both good lines of defense, but I just want to hear it from you. What do you recommend people to do?
We recommend, if at all possible, to use soap and water, and if you have hand sanitizer available, use that in addition to.
Can you tell us a little bit about the state's outreach efforts here? We were at the BDM. We reported that there were, no press advisories regarding this issue this year, as there had been in years past. What does the state do, to educate the public about this?
The illnesses are caused by E. coli, which is a common organism throughout the environment, and it's carried by animals in their gut as well as by us. There are hundreds of strains of E. coli, most of which are harmless, some of which can cause disease, and some of which can produce the toxins that cause this Shiga toxin-producing illness. And we do see cases on a regular basis of Shiga toxin-producing E. coli illness, or STEC, and that is a reportable condition to the Maine CDC. We investigate each case as it comes up to determine if there is, what is the potential or probable method of exposure, how they perhaps got exposed. But in many cases, we never can determine that because there are so many possibilities because it's in the environment. in a case like this, where we have children who become ill, by the time we hear of it, it is past the incubation period, and the fair has closed, and there is nothing more that we can say other than, to continue to wash your hands for the future if you're exposed to animals. And that is a common thing that we would say no matter what. Animals carry organisms that can cause human illness. And anytime you are around animals, you should wash your hands after exposure or contact.
Have you seen any other recent cases identified as 0111?
So far this year, we have had 6 cases of HUS reported to the Maine CDC. These are the only 2 cases with serotype 0111.
My father also wanted me to ask, are there any particular farm animals that this is more likely to happen, or is it all farm animals? Because
my understanding is that it's more common in ruminants, so cattle, sheep, goats. You might know that better than me.
No,
I'm not a farmer. I'm sorry.
well, the reason I bring that up,
Yeah.
he told me he had they were in close contact with a newborn calf, and wondered if maybe it wasn't just feces and stuff. Maybe it's blood. I don't know. I'm just saying if there were any particular animals that were more prone to maybe stay away from.
So Jim, that may be a question better for agriculture, since they handle livestock far
Okay.
more than we do, and we handle people. The other thing that I think is important to point out is that we still don't know with 100% certainty that the livestock area is the cause. We're still waiting those other tests. So while there seems to be that likely length, and it's clear that it's being reported that that is the reason, we still don't have all of our tests completed. So I understand the father's concerns, and it's a terrible case, but we're still trying to get to the bottom of all that.
But short answer, John is absolutely correct. But cows are a reservoir for E. coli.
Cows,
Yes.
more so than chickens and.
Again, you'd have to ask
Okay.
the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know what the source of the contamination, of the E. coli contamination was for cases in 2014 or 15 yet? Maybe John knows.
The epidemiologists do investigate to try and identify a possible source of infection. E. coli of this nature you can get from not only exposure to animals and contact with animals, but from things like contaminated lettuce, uncooked beef, unpasteurized milk products. There's a whole range of foods that have actually been identified as the source of outbreaks in the past. So it's really difficult. We do try and see if we can identify a common source. Sometimes it's just not possible. Sometimes because the person may have had multiple possible exposures.
In interviewing the parents of the 2 most recent cases, have you identified any other commonalities other than the fair?
We haven't completed our investigation with the family, so we can't answer that at this time.
So you're talking 6 this year, including these 2.
No,
Right.
these 2 are included in those 6.
So 4 others.
4 others.
What would the outcomes, do we know? Just,
I honestly don't know the outcomes.
I talked with RPs today. We don't know the cause was undetermined, and in the majority of these cases, that's typically where it ends up as an undetermined cause.
No, but I think your question was regarding the status of the cases. Is that correct?
well, just more information. Do we know if they're kids, they've recovered well, and whatever? Do we
I
know?
really don't know.
Okay.
I believe that this, the young boy who died this week, I think, is the first death that we are aware of
Yeah, right.
in the state of Maine.
It's in recorded history of the state of Maine.
I can't say in recorded history,
Oh,
but
I'll have to
the
take a look to
epidemiologist
see,
looked
yeah.
and said that to her knowledge, she had looked through and did not see, to our knowledge, it's not. But then,
It's the only one that you know of.
that we know.
And in terms of the other cases, we do know that all of the cases were in children under the age of 5. 3 were from Androscoggin County, including the 2, and 3 others were from York County.
So there were 33 cases total. There have been 33 confirmed cases of E. coli this year, and 6 were.
There have been 26 confirmed cases of STEC.
Okay.
And of those, six developed HUS,
Okay.
hemolytic uremic syndrome. Sorry, it's hard to say.
But total was the undercarriage of death. Is that what you
As
know?
far as we know.
Okay.
Well, I take that back. We cannot confirm a death.
So I just want to, again, because since this thing broke out, and now we kept hearing from the doctors that we spoke with, this is extremely rare, on and on and on, yet we've got 2, now we're hearing 6, and 4 recovered, obviously, but parents, are obviously concerned. And aside from this hand washing, I mean, what else do you want the public to know? Or what should they do? The parents of these 2 that are, one that's gone now and one that's still fighting, really want this to be a platform for let's make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else. We've already talked about hand washing, so I guess what else can you say as the head here of the CDC that people should do or shouldn't do?
People need to be aware that there is potential for contracting illness from contact with animals as well as from other sources. And it always pays to be vigilant, to wash your hands, make sure that your food is washed properly, that you don't eat uncooked meat, to help decrease the risk of illness.
Thank you.
A lot of parents have been calling since this story came about because, it's that time of year, and a lot of people in the newsroom, they brought their kids, and you never think you could go home and deal with this tragedy. Was there anything, a lot of the questions are, and I know you answered this, but there were no advisories, no press releases. Was there anything that could have been done different to warn the public sooner of the possibility that maybe if someone had gone there to pay attention to their kids and know, it's not just diarrhea, if they have it's a possibility that it could be worse?
Our message is that we always need to be careful when we're in contact with animals or in that environment. We live in an agricultural state, and I think it's going to be a little bit inevitable, but it's, no matter what, wash your hands and maintain good hygiene. It helps protect you against influenza, the cold, as well as diseases such as this. We do our best when we hear of illnesses such as this to put out alerts if there is something that the public can do or individuals can do to protect themselves. In a case such as this, things have already gone so far and that the incubation period is past, that there's nothing really that we can do other than repeat ourselves for future reference and future education to actually remind people to wash their hands, maintain good hygiene.
We work with agriculture on a lot of the messaging around this. There's signage. There is supposed to be signage at every fair. There's supposed to be hand sanitizer at every fair. And agriculture sort of oversees that part of the fair health inspection pieces. We at CDC do the food inspections. But we are working, we've been in conversation. Clearly this is a tragic situation. And we've been in conversation with them about what can we do in the further to do campaigns around hand washing, other elements to make the public aware. Keeping in mind that E. coli, as Dr. Bennett said, can be almost anywhere. And again, while it seems somewhat, people are assuming that this all is because of the fair, it may not have been. We do know that the common exposure is there, but it could be from a foodborne illness or something else. So in terms of us being able to alert the general public, if there was something that the public could have done, I think we would have been more apt to release the information. It's very situational in terms of how we do that, because we've got to be very careful that we don't release misinformation. That's happened a lot in cases where lettuce has been identified as a source, and it turns out to be cucumbers. And we, in the process of that lettuce business, if you will, has lost all of its business, and we've misinformed the public, and we've given them misinformation. So if we can get to the point where we know where the common exposure is and get the information in a timely way where people can do something with that information, we will. But we are revisiting what we might do in the upcoming years in terms of preseason messaging, including a hand washing campaign that may last throughout the year, because that's one of the best protections that we can take.
We do work closely with the state veterinarian and the Department of Agriculture on any of these illnesses that is animal associated.
So Dr. Bennett has time for one or two more questions, so if there are any left.
Does the state need to change any of its laws or policies with regard to petting zoos, or would that be something that agriculture would deal with, Doctor?
I suspect that would be, you'd have to raise that with the Department of Agriculture.
One more question if you have any left.
Are toddlers, like under 6, particularly vulnerable to these types of illnesses? I mean, could adults carry the same thing and simply just not suffer these awful consequences?
Yes, Shigatoxin producing E. coli or STEP, the illness, infants under the age of 5 and the elderly are more susceptible, and infants under the age of 5 are more likely to go on to develop complications such as hemolytic uremic.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much for coming up to Augusta today. Really appreciate it. We're hoping that we can do something as soon as we have the test results from the debris and such from the